Welcome, everyone. My name is Alex Grossi. Just want to introduce you. We'll have everybody run through kind of quick intro, but welcome to the Spendflo and Received webinar for going over your cash flow and kind of struggles with CFOs are experiencing today in our ever-evolving economy, particularly as it relates to SaaS and kind of cash flow management and really kind of optimizing your back-end processes and kind of those nuanced details that really make the difference, but aren't necessarily what gets all of the attention all of the time. So happy to maybe make sense. I can come back to myself, but Roy or Sid or Glenn, one of you want to hop in and go first?
Roy, I'm looking at you.
I'm Roy, CEO and co-founder of Received. We solve complex billing, which currently our customers that we built for our B2B software companies and specifically mid-market companies and up in terms of size. I've been building in fintech for a decade now, set up the Visa partnerships team in Tel Aviv, was part of Visa Ventures. I speak finance, although I didn't take that route, so studied law and accounting and did my master's in University of Chicago. So that's me, and great to be here.
Awesome.
Thanks, Roy.
I can go next. So hey, I'm Sid. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Spendflo. At Spendflo, we help companies save and simplify all things SaaS, how they buy, manage, and secure it. And we do that with guaranteed savings as well. So just prior to Spendflo, I'm a recovering investment banker, but I also ran BizOps for a bunch of companies where my CFO didn't particularly like me for spending too much money on SaaS, and that's what actually made me start the company. And now we've been at it for the last 2.5 years, and serving customers around the world. And we've also got to meet awesome folks like Roy, Alex, and Glenn along the way.
Very cool. Thanks, Sid.
All right, I guess does that leave me? I'm Glenn, and I've been worked in finance for about a quarter of a century now. Last 15 years or so, I was a CFO, primarily in the startup space, and which means that what we're talking about today is near and dear to my heart, because those of you in the startup world know that in the startup space, your cash flow is the difference between being able to make payroll or not. It's a lot more meaningful than when you're with a big company. So yeah, I've been in finance pretty much the bulk of my professional career, most of that in the CFO role. And as of late, I'm working as a business advisory consultant. I help companies with everything from M&A valuations, fractional CFO needs, SEC filings, and just doing financial services consulting.
Cool. Thanks, Glenn. My name is Alex. I'm just the moderator today, but I kind of have shared experiences across the spectrum from investment banking and private credit to start up through making a transition into ops and kind of a little bit of venture capital, but really kind of using those high-level finance skills to be able to kind of optimize operations and really kind of perform on a P&L basis, not just on a revenue basis. So that's kind of my intro background, and happy to jump into questions if that makes sense for the panel. As I kind of introed today, in today's economy, CFOs are under significant pressure, particularly to minimize those costs while not, detracting from maximizing revenue. What do you guys think? Do you also feel the pressure, or kind of what are your experience where you see CFOs should at least begin if it's something, that they're kind of pushing off and delaying?
Yeah, I guess I'll take that one first. I think, it's in the CFO world, there's the macro economy, and then in the startup world where I've primarily been, there's obviously the macro economy, but then there's managing what's going on in your business. And I think whether you're a startup or a more mature business, from the finance and accounting role, I think it's important, so many times we're just laser focused on kind of the ivory tower of finance and accounting, and we're just thinking about, it doesn't matter what the widgets are, we're just reporting on the widgets and forecasting the widgets and all that. But I think, and there's been an evolution over the years towards this, but you can't just live in sort of the finance and accounting bubble anymore. You have to understand your business and the drivers, and really just understand the company's business model a lot more, so that you can understand, the revenue drivers, the cost drivers, and the key metrics that track the company's performance, and not looking at those as if they're just numbers on a spreadsheet or in a dashboard, but knowing what levers you need to pull to drive certain things. And I know that's what we're going to get in today, but I mean, things that maybe in the past we thought of as just marketing numbers. Well, just sales and marketing numbers have a big impact on the top line and the bottom line. So looking at things like customer acquisition costs, lifetime value in a SaaS business, or gross margins, inventory turns, in the case of a manufacturing or
Yeah, do you have maybe like 5 key metrics that maybe, broadly that, CFOs, independent of vertical or anything like that, they can start looking at?
Yeah, and it's, yeah. So I'll throw these out, and then they may vary based on what industry you're in and sort of where the business is. But I think the 5 key ones that come into play for me are, so we look at revenue, and you can see it's up or down month over month or quarter over quarter or whatever. But I think the real health of the business, not just looking at each month as a standalone, but actually the revenue growth rate. So are you, how quickly are you growing, or hopefully not, but shrinking in revenue. And I think that's an important one to look at. So it gets you out. If you're looking at the growth rate, you're getting beyond just looking at 1 month's numbers. You're thinking about where you're going over time. Certainly, and this goes with more to the cost side, but looking at your gross margin, looking at how much it costs you to deliver the service that you're providing to the customers, net, outside of all the operational expenses and SG&A you have, but really that margin, because if you're a very thin margin business, you don't have a lot of room for error and for missing. And if you're, in looking at margin, not just at the company level or the department level or the product level, but even at the company level. So just thinking about margin in a lot of different ways. Going back to my startup roots, I think operating whether you're a startup or a fully developed business, operating cash flow is important. But in the startup world, it's thought of more as your cash burn rate. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Also, yeah. Oh, and go ahead, Ted, if you got.
I just wanted to add to that as well. That's the thing that I guess most CEOs also are like, burn multiple is something that that's top of mind for me. Month-on-month growth rate is something that's top of mind. Those are the 2 things that honestly run the business. If I were to pick not even 5, just like 2 that I have to really, really optimize for as like somebody earlier in their stage, or somebody actually in that growth phase today, right? So I think and that's the thing that my finance team does a really good job of, like bringing me all of it, but making sure that I'm really focused on a couple of these items, right? And obviously runway, right? Like what's the runway look like as well? So and what's the forecasted burn is also another thing, because it's committed spend that you want to make, and what are you actually forecasting towards? So that's how my finance team has actually trained me to become better. So and be watchful of it. That's something that I wanted to add.
So another one that's big for me, and I think that this is when you're whether you're a public company or a private company that's seeking to raise money from investment, or if you're seeking to raise debt. One of the things, when anyone invests in your company, they have to think about the opportunity cost. It's like, well, I'm investing in this company instead of another way that I could deploy my capital. So whether it's a private placement, VC, PE, so tracking what that return on equity is, so that you can tell investors how their money is being spent and being grown, so that investment is better than, because they're looking at, I can either build a portfolio and invest in your company, or I could just buy, a spider and just buy the whole market. And if you're not outperforming the market, I've misinvested here. So return on equity is an important one. And I mentioned the last, I combine them, but very important to think about as you're trying to grow a business. Customer acquisition cost and customer lifetime value are the two big ones.
The just the other thing that I wanted to add as well to your first question, Alex, on like how CFOs are actually feeling, because we talked to a lot of them today. The thing is that I think a lot of them have started thinking about how this is actually a massive opportunity for them as well. Primarily because they used to be looked like the referee in the past, but now they're actually like the point guard in today's environment, because the cash decisions that they make today are what lead to the success of the company maybe 10 years down the line. Obviously, the strategy, vision, all of that is like founders and a bunch of things, but like day-to-day cash decisions on like how do I actually run that playbook with my team, and what's the sales and marketing spend? How do I calculate R&D spend? Like where do I make those plays is something that I think that's a massive opportunity for CFOs to actually step up in this environment more than anything else, more than any other environment that I think they've been in. Because like the last ones is not, I think last, I guess, crisis or so, cash just wasn't available. Cash is still available today. It's just like a lot more expensive. That's the only difference.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Sid, in terms of like, being dynamic is, I mean, that's something that people harp on, but you really do see the difference between kind of an operating approach, previously when times were good. And to your point, it was maybe more of a referee kind of thing, when growth is kind of unlimited, or at least very kind of common, that's the role you end up in. As of now, it's kind of, you're actually kind of figuring out how you can create efficiencies with capital and kind of increase multiples and really kind of focus on it. Roy, what are you seeing on your side over it, or related to this relative with Received?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I want to say that I love the mix of this panel, because you got two CFOs, two finance professionals, and then Sid and I, in a way, represent the buyer and the seller, right? I'm on the on the seller side, on the billing side, and Sid sees the dynamics on the buyer side. So I'm curious on how that will create interesting debate on this panel. But in any case, there's a couple of things that we see, and I also I did a survey with our customer base, so the data is fresh out of the oven. I think we're seeing two main things. One is on the unit and variable economics, and I think Glenn touched on that. That's CAC and LTV. Many CFOs are telling me that there's an immense pressure and scrutiny on optimizing that. Obviously, when you're a mid-market company and up, not all customer channels or not all customers are born alike. So CAC and LTV are going to look different. Cohorts, geographies, company size, those are going to look different, and companies are starting to optimize for that. We see companies cutting on sales and marketing spend and automating the customer acquisition funnel. In terms of LTV, historically, payback period was in the 5 to 12 month range, and I think there was, we're coming off a pretty frothy market where growth was everything, and free cash roamed the earth. I think there's much more scrutiny on optimizing for your CAC payback and LTV in general. I mean, we see customers, and this is actually on the billing side. We see customers looking much more carefully on their total contract value, ACV, churn, renewals. So if before this market, everything was about growth, and obviously many people before me have said this, the unit economics are much more significant at the moment. So that's the unit economics, that's the variable part of the business. On the fixed cost side of the business, there's much more scrutiny on OpEx. You know, yesterday companies were again like spending like crazy, and that meant bigger teams, more than needed for today, bigger offices, more than needed for today. And all of a sudden your, you know, fixed asset, long-term assets, you know, can bloat more than is adequate for your stage. So I think, you know, everything that's non-contributing in terms of spend and OpEx is really being scrutinized. And we see this with the layoffs over layoffs, and companies are being stuck with the big offices and, you know, not knowing what to do. Also, we see that with a system purge, right? People are cutting down on SaaS spend, and Sid can talk about that. And the bar for your product when you sell a SaaS product is so much more higher because of that.
Yeah, Roy, to your point, and to Sid, kind of interested to see kind of what moving in-house, what you know, either from sell side or buy side, what you're seeing from operations perspective, because, you know, to a certain extent, SaaS is relatively easy to adopt and get rid of. Kind of are people holding on to things, picking up new things, just kind of in that search for efficiency, or where are you kind of seeing this?
Yeah, I think like Wiley, everybody kind of like overdid it in the last couple of years, right? Like they just ate a little too much, and now they're like in that dieting phase, right? Like they're really like trying to hit the gym and get back in shape and lower their calorie count and do all of that work, right? Like you get on like fasting regimes or whatever. Like that's how even companies are operating today, because they ate a lot, they felt bloated, and now they're in that stage where they're trying to shed all that excess fat, right? And like the thing about like just SaaS and how it's getting bought inside these organizations, it used to be so decentralized because like growth was like so like pretty easy to come, so everyone was just growing, great, everybody spend the money, no problem. But now I think now it's typically from in the sales orgs, CFOs have been known as the killer of deals. So now it's like, it's just very commonplace. Honestly, deals are like taking double the time, whatever it might be. Renewals are also taking a lot of time and effort, right? So, and you're being questioned all along the way for anything as small as like $10,000 all the way to like, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Like, so it's the same amount of effort today to sell a $30,000 or a $50,000 deal as it is to sell like a $150,000 deal. There is no difference in the effort that the teams on the vendor side have to actually put together. And unfortunately, CFOs have been inundated with these requests now, that it's getting on, I think it's honestly getting on their nerves. So I think there's going to be like I feel like kind of like most of the worst is behind us. I think this is like the new normal for the next couple of years of how companies are going to operate. So as like somebody who's buying, like who's seeing a bunch of SaaS buying data, I think it's really important to make sure that you listen to your customers and you build what they want and keep the existing ones really happy so that they can actually champion you for the next ones as well, right? Like, so because and as sellers, your regular marketing channels are not going to work anymore. It's just getting harder and harder. CAC is always going to keep growing, right? It's a hard. This is what the norm is. I think this is what 2018, which is back to like 2018, where it was hard to sell SaaS. It still is. It should be hard to buy SaaS as well. It's the reason why it's hard to buy, because it's a financial decision that needs to get taken. Across the board.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue. Into your earlier point, Roy. What are you seeing on your side of the house? Interested to hear the dynamics.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the mirror image of what Sid is saying. On I guess I have a couple of thoughts. One is on our category, AR and billing, as kind of analogy to the CFO stack and selling to CFO, which is an interesting point. And then on just what companies are doing strategically with customers. So on the first point, I think adding to that interesting evolution of the sea of solutions that we're all swamped with over sales and marketing and HR and IT, in the recent, let's say, 2-3 years, there's a growing number of tools and systems being built for CFOs. And in many ways, I think it's one of the last digital frontiers in the organization. And it's really interesting that we're building and selling to CFOs at such a time, right? Where CFOs are the watchdogs of the organization. And I think that if you can sell to a CFO in this environment, you're doing a pretty good job. Like the bar is so much higher in terms of persona and market conditions. So if you're selling to CFOs and if CFOs are adopting, you're doing something right. In AR and billing, for example, I guess there's a point to be made about point solution versus like wide solutions. So specifically, I mean, there's a bit of a mini discussion about ERP, like, the ERP has been dismantled and is it going to be rebuilt with Ripley and Gusto, those folks, or are we going to see, I call it the sun and the planets, like, are we going to see the ERP with great connectivity tissue to all these great spend management and billing and so on? I think that, mid-market and up solutions gotta be verticalized and specialized for the type of companies. Like, not enough people are asking which CFO, it's not any CFO. Is it a B2B software CFO, marketplace CFO, B2C CFO? These tend to need different tools. And even within our planet category, the bar is so much higher. So what's required of us as a billing platform is to do usage, pricing, contracts, billing, but also rev rec, tax, payments, and so on, right? So it's really an arms race, even for new entrants. Like, no one's gonna forgive you if you're a startup and you gotta ship really, really fast and in high quality. So I guess that's my major point of what's happening in the organization, using the CFO stack as an example. And I just want to double down what Sid said. There's more focus on retention, keeping what's, like, in terms of the customer dynamic, like keeping the customer base and fighting for that retention. But I think Sid made most of that point. So
yeah, no, that was a great follow on, because Sid, I completely agree. Kind of what we've seen kind of over the past couple of years is, there was such a high kind of growth in the number of SaaS companies, particularly, multiple companies in very specific spaces, that, we saw just kind of a growth of licenses and kind of seats over time. And so it's because of that, though, that's kind of why we saw the spend management and kind of these SaaS management platforms appear kind of, during a non-recessionary period, which I think has been kind of great in terms of, all these companies kind of building out and actually delivering in terms of high quality product and ready to go to market and, delivering as promised. But kind of, Glenn, now throwing it over to you in terms of how have you seen particularly the CFO tech stack progress over time as it relates, kind of to those pieces in terms of, picking up a bunch of licenses and now moving to manage kind of those expenses?
Yeah, money is harder to come by. It's more expensive when you get it. VC is dried up, for over 6 months now. So again, I tend to speak more to the startup space, but or even, debt is more expensive now too. Just money is more expensive in general, and it's a tighter environment. So we went through this period that Sid was referring to, where it was revenue growth at any cost, just get top line in, and as everybody was flush with cash from investment, so hiring and just throwing everything at the wall and just kind of riding the wave up. And that includes technology decisions and, the pace of everything moving very quickly. You feel like if I don't decide and get this piece of software and add this to my tech stack right now, then I'm going to miss out. So it was growth at any cost. And I think that when the environment slows down, that it makes you have to think more about what you're doing. So while, maybe we grew too fast, we tried to grow top line too fast, we were just throwing everything out there. Now you're looking at it and you're reassessing. I think that now it's a matter of, it's fundamental. It's finance 101. Cost reduction efforts are.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just to jump in there. Kind of, what are you finance 101? What are you thinking in terms of those strategies now to maximize revenue, potentially minimize costs? Now, kind of in this new, when growth isn't thick on the ground and you have to get creative.
Yeah. So this is getting back to the fundamentals. And so the very first step is look at audit your current financial and operational status. So your revenue by product, your revenue by region, not just whatever the top line is, looking down, okay, which one of our products are performing the most? Look at not just products, but look at your customers, look at your segments, and look at the margins for each. Did you make bad deals just trying to bring revenue in? So assess and understand where you are with each of your products. Is something a loss leader that is, low margin or upside down, but it leads to other sales? Look at your retention more closely. It's easier or it's cheaper to retain a customer than to acquire a new customer. So putting efforts into retention, but looking at all these things, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, I guess, but it starts with an audit of understanding where you are and analyzing all that. But then, people, when you're flush with cash and everything seems like it's going gangbusters and you can't, you can do no wrong, it's easy to just sort of have a budget and just say, well, we did this much last year, let's just carry it out and do a kind of a top down, just push, okay, marketing, you get this much, operations, you get this much. But when you really start to dive in, not just on the revenue side, but then on your cost side, like, wow, we've only grown revenue by 12% this year, but our expenses have gone up 35%. Something's out of kilter there. So bringing that all in line. So making a true bottom-up budget, and before you make the budget, you look at the business, you understand where you are, and you make a business plan. You come up with a strategy, and then you figure out how much it's going to cost to make that strategy work. Build the budget, have all the departments participate in building that budget, and then hold them accountable to it. Regularly meet, at the month end close, if there's metrics you can get during the month, meet on those, hold everyone accountable. And if you are going off track somewhere, the goal here is to have data available as soon as possible so you can course correct as needed. Regularly monitoring and measuring the results, the OKRs and the KPIs, and just say, we have to do this by this date. And if we miss it, we need to explain why, and we need to figure out how we're going to make up for missing that. So holding the team accountable. And then I think that technology adds a lot. If you can leverage the right solutions, they're going to make you more efficient. They're going to make you, automation can reduce the number of people and it can reduce the number of errors. But I think you have to be smart about it. And I think a lot of times people make software decisions. They just, a salesperson comes in, impresses them with a piece of software, and they just say, oh, I need this software, not here's my actual requirements. How can this software solve my problem, rather than let me just buy this software and then jam everything into it and think that that's going to fix things for me in the future.
Yeah, well, and Roy, probably maybe back to you. That's kind of maybe, as I saw software developing, I think it's kind of like a funnel, right? In terms of, there are steps, and you can expand those steps as you have, resources, whether it's time or money. But yeah, I think having the ability to deep dive and kind of expand that funnel and really start to understand not only what are your top level OKRs, but kind of how you the sub pieces and the sub OKRs and kind of different metrics that contribute to the broader piece. But yeah, and Roy, I think yeah, what have you seen in terms of, is it that easy to sell software at this point in time now?
No, it's not easy, as we said. Listen, we're seeing people, CFOs, companies, CEOs, really, again, to that point. Yesterday, I feel like in yesterday's market, people just threw cash at problems. I'm just gonna spend more on paid campaigns. I'm just gonna bring in an army of SDRs. I'm just just outsourcing. It's a bit lazy, just outsourcing everything instead of being smart. But now no one has a choice but to be smart about maximizing revenue and minimizing cost. I prepared a couple of examples of what we're seeing in terms of maximizing revenue. One is profit maximizing or pricing maximizing, and the second is revenue diversification. So about profit maximizing, let's just remind folks kind of I think the accepted pricing methodology today, specifically in software, is value-based pricing, where you look at the reference value, like what's the cost of the next best alternative, and then you add to that the differential value, how much more valuable I am for the customer in their perspective, and then total economic value, like the reference value and differential value. And it's that cliche of a cold can of Coke on a beach on a hot summer day is much more valuable, and you can charge more for it than a Coke at a Walmart, right? So you gotta understand the value of what you're selling, and I think although that's widely accepted, not everyone does it that well still to this day. There's a 2x2 metrics of willingness to pay and usage intensity, right? High willingness to pay, low willingness to pay, customers that use my product a lot versus customers that don't use my product that often. And we're seeing companies that do what I call value capture in downturn. What does that mean? That means thinking of, okay, I have my products, like this is my armory of like going to battle in today's market. Like anything that's new, any new feature, any new capability is gonna take resources and time to build. Is there any value? Like I build the value, now I need to capture it, meaning charge for it, right? Like I need to represent the value I bring to the customer in my price. And there's like a neat way to think about it is to think about that high willingness to pay and high usage bracket. These are super users that you can do differential pricing with, meaning there are probably customers that are willing to pay more for what you're offering them. So one kind of neat tactic that I heard from a CFO is do priority support, for example. So in your customer base, there are people that are indifferent to the support, and there are people that are very sensitive to the support. You can charge more for priority support, and those customers will pay more and be happier, while the other customer cohort, which is indifferent, will feel no difference, right? So that's one tactic of like how to think about that high usage, high willingness to pay bracket. So be smart about your pricing, maximize for profit. There's like this old saying of the easiest way to increase revenue is to increase price. That's out the window in a down market. So you got to be much more savvy about it. The other piece of advice that what we're seeing out there is revenue diversification, and actually that's much more salient on the billing side. And OpenView VC talks about this a lot, like SaaS and subscription pricing versus usage pricing, like a pay-as-you-go software consumption. I think the recent data was 62% of software companies have either adopted usage, not exclusively, but are using usage or testing it out. And we're actually seeing two contradicting competitive pressures with our customer base. The one is from customers. So they want more flexibility. So they don't necessarily want to pay the $30K license that you're asking for upfront. They say, I want to de-risk, I'm more hesitant, let me pay as I go. Okay, so that's one piece of pressure from customers. The other side of the pressure is from investors. So if you're very heavy on usage pricing, that means also that you have less revenue stability. And guess what investors like? They like revenue stability. So that creates a situation where you have like contradicting pressures, where you gotta diversify and you gotta just have more complex and hybrid pricing, where you need to tend to different types of pressure. I'll just lastly say, sorry for this a bit too long. Lastly say that one neat thing that we see our customers doing is thinking more smartly about services. I think in a sales-led go-to-market motion, services are innate to what you're bringing to market. And I think also that services pricing tends to be a bit lazy, but there are ways to be smarter or more diverse about your services. Like you can say, I'm not charging for services, rather I'm putting services in a higher tier license. So now you're turning your services into recurring revenue, or just selling services. And we also saw that with a bunch of customers, selling services in recurring packages. So that's also one part of our mission, is to have customers give customers the ability to be smarter about their pricing and experiment more.
Yeah, interesting. No, and I think that was fantastic info. And Glenn, I think you can tie everything together. But first, Sid, the piece, the opposite side of the coin, instead of maximizing revenue, what kind of according to you, is an opportunity for spend costs that CFOs can start to go after, particularly, as Roy had mentioned, I think there is kind of probably because the data is becoming more and more available, but that transition to usage over just flat or kind of subscription pricing. Just curious what you're seeing on the other side of the coin, Sid.
Yeah, for sure. I think the first thing, from a spend standpoint, right? We've seen really smart CFOs and procurement leaders really do this well. First, you got to take inventory of all your costs, right? That's the first piece that you have to really do. Because without that inventory, you have no idea where to go and optimize. The second is if it's a SaaS tool, right? And SaaS is the thing, you need to get whether your teams actually are using it, not using it, and then whether your teams actually like it or not through a sentiment or some way, right? It's super simple, so that then they get bought in, because then they don't feel like, you can never get take away toys from a young kid. That's how folks feel if you take away their favorite SaaS tool, it doesn't do anything for them, right? So, but you get them to opt into that process. So that's the second piece. And the third is now that you have that, you can actually go and deduplicate really quickly, right? That deduplication by itself will get you some significant savings. And just because most companies use 4 project management tools. Even we do, right? I have no idea why. But and then you have the fifth, and then the next step is to actually just have data when you start negotiating as well in that table. Have data on your internal spend, internal usage, and your internal sentiment. Yeah, you can get great benchmarks on all of that as well. That's available, but like just having that internal data is just enough for you to have a very informed conversation, right? You're going to a vendor that, okay, you prove value to me, I'm going to go give you more money. Not prove value to me, and this is why you're not prove value to me, right? Like that's a good conversation. Like you having that data before you go to the customer, before you go to the vendor. And fifth, you got to rinse and repeat this every quarter. This has to happen every quarter. If you don't do this every quarter, you'll be stuck in the same place. Like you'll be in the same place that you started 1 year from now. And I think Glenn can like attest to that any process that you put in place for optimization has to be repeatable. Any type of spend optimization for that matter, right? So that's like my quick 5-step for that.
No, and that makes complete sense. And I think the sentiment piece is probably one of the tougher pieces to overcome internally. It's the sentiment is probably that's a great point, because it's probably one of the biggest things, right? It's the easiest reason to justify a purchase on the front end, and also yeah, one of the best reasons, or at least the first reason that's going to come up when the CFO wants to cut it. So Glenn, kind of that sentiment piece is pretty big, but kind of what are you seeing from managing internally that balance between using kind of the data and understanding what's actually occurring, from an ops perspective and an expense perspective, to managing in-house kind of people's wants and needs against kind of, what's out there?
So I had a flippant answer, and people who have dealt with the CFO would say this. I was going to say, I'm the CFO. I don't care about your wants and needs.
That's true.
But in all seriousness, I mean, I frequently preach about making data-driven decisions, and we know that we live in a world with unlimited wants and limited resources. And there's a reason that people call the CFO the CFO. I mean, we have this rap of being people who will say, oh no, that's not in budget, we can't do it, I don't even want to talk about it. But one thing that I think that's important for whoever's holding the purse strings at a company is you make a budget, you make a plan, and you go into battle in the business world. And if your plan works, that's great. You must have had a crystal ball or something to get through it. But when things start going awry, or when things, whether within the company or within the marketplace or the broader world, start to change, you have to be flexible and adaptable to the plan. So just because whenever you finally finalized your annual budget, be that in November or in February, when something changes, you can't just be dogmatic about what's in that budget. You have to take this new reality. So if somebody comes to you with a project and it actually has an ROI to it, you need to factor that in, even if it's outside of your budget, and especially if you're not performing up to your original budgeted numbers. So you've got your original budget, and then you need to be fluent and update your forecast and look at what changes. And I love the idea. When you're building the budget, you want to give some top-down direction, but you want all the people in the individual departments to be able to tell you what you need. And that's the art, is finding the right balance between those unlimited wants and the limited resources. So just as you trust them to build the budget, and I would say, tell your teams when they come to you, don't just come to me and say, we need to spend another $600,000 on whatever this project is, without a full explanation of how that's going to improve and not just be an additional spend. So it is a lot of teamwork back and forth, and it does matter what the team says they need to survive in the marketplace and to help grow the company. But everything, to me, different departments may say different, but everything has to come back to, we at least have to have a theoretical payback and ROI on this, because otherwise we're just throwing good money after bad in some cases.
Yeah, and that makes complete sense. And your kind of golden piece, golden tip is that planning piece, and then just following up on that planning process, because the top down and bottoms up approach, that's really kind of where you identify, at least on my personal experience, those metrics, because, you know, a lot of those, particularly, you know, if you're at a early stage, you know, brand new startup, a lot of those are day zero metrics. So if you, you know, understand that that's what's the driver, and then have to start kind of watching those and making data-driven, you know, decisions based on those, it really kind of comes together. And then again, it just kind of delves deeper based on more of your resources, which, you know, if it's growing revenue or billing, you know, Roy and Sid on the expense side, kind of those are the pieces that, you know, we've tried to bring together. And we're going to go to questions here in a minute. But yeah, one of the big pieces is we're going to have a poll here coming up. So if you're looking for, you know, focusing either both on the revenue and on the expenses, or kind of really building out your AR and billing with Spendflo, or your expenses, or sorry, with Receive, or your expenses with Spendflo. Yeah, I'd love to learn how you guys feel about demo, but any other last points before we start heading into questions?
Yes. So my tip for CFOs today would be, it's actually a soft tip, like you know, not a numbers thing, but it's not all about numbers. Sorry, CFOs, but I see knowledge sharing being so crucial in a down market. For many people, actually, not just CFOs, but extremely important for CFOs, because in a down market, in a volatile market, you can throw a lot of assumptions straight out the window, right? And you know, Tina Dimitrov from Bain Capital Ventures, we were on a panel together in New York. She speaks of the eras and the evolutions of CFOs. And kind of she calls it wave 3. CFOs, or today's CFOs, are kind of mini founders. They need to be scrappy as hell. They're the chief of everything officer. They do everything from fundraising to being system architects to renegotiating contracts and being like in vendor meetings. And I think that I see knowledge sharing being so important. So one place that I saw that is the Gartner CFO conference. And I think we actually have Valeria, which is a Gartner analyst on the call. So hi, Valeria, good to see you again. And also, and you know, there was such a great conversation happening there, you know, in a breakfast table, and like, you know, coffee breaks and inside the rooms and sessions. And you can just see CFOs being thirsty for knowledge and like current information and best practices. We actually had our own CFO roundtable that we did with Sarit Firon. She was a career CFO in tech. Now she's a managing partner at Teammate, a big VC. We had 50 CFOs in one room, and like so many new learnings being shared. I think one of the things with CFOs is that there's a change of the guard. Like most CFOs in tech, at least today, are millennials, right? They're like 35-year-old, 40-year-old, like in that kind of range. And which is I'm in that range, and we didn't experience a downturn. Okay, we graduated from university, or we were in school in 2008, but we weren't employed. Definitely, we didn't make any big decisions like in a big downturn, you know. So I think that only intensifies the need for knowledge sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's why these webinars are super helpful, because yeah, that knowledge sharing, just from having a conversation, you can, you know, glean a lot of insights that, you know, the person you're talking to, you know, would never, I don't know, put into a blog or publication. And so it's really kind of one of those things where, you know, unless you're out there meeting people or watching webinars, you know, staying up into it on the space, it's tough to kind of track and learn new things, or there's going to be a significant kind of lag.
Yeah. It's like
Sid, yeah, closing thoughts before we head into questions, at least?
Yeah, I think in general, I think we just need to learn how to simplify our lives. a little bit like across the board, like whether it be with like sales, whether it be with like how your book, like your financial operations as well. I think we get caught up in the weeds on like, okay, great, like it moves to complicated very quickly. I think the simpler you keep it, like I'd still have hair if I had kept it that way, but so I've learned the hard way. So I think that's the goal. Like I think that's the theme of the year for me, at least, is to just keep it simple, right? Like that's what I talk to everybody about.
Yeah, fair. Glenn, parting thoughts before questions?
So, I mean, one thing we didn't talk about that I always love to talk about, and I think about the book Scaling Up, Vern Harnish, and he certainly didn't invent this, but he does a great job in the section on finance and talking about it. Cash conversion cycle. So we're talking about the decisions you make and everything, but I think one thing that we all just need to keep in mind is how long it takes for us to spend a dollar and to get it back. So I think thinking about everything from faster receivables to being able to stretch out your payable, negotiating with your vendors in there. And I do think that as we're looking at capital being harder to come by, and as are we going to go into a recession? Maybe it's not as likely as we thought it was 6 months ago, but certainly there's always the challenge of doing more with less. So I think thinking about making that cash conversion cycle as short as possible is the way to go.
Yeah, it's absolutely not going to hurt in the short term, at least. Okay, running into questions. Our first question is, how should the spend be divided between sales, marketing, product for SaaS organizations? And I think this is an interesting question that everybody can answer, at least from a, having an ops perspective. But who wants to field that one first in terms of kind of the breakout between sales, marketing, product?
I could throw out a general idea, and then so I know when you're trying, especially in the startup world, when you're trying to figure out your company's budgets, you want to look at industry benchmarks and say, well, what do most people spend on marketing, and what do most people spend? What is the G&A that's behind it, and what should I look at as what my cost of goods sold are? And I think that the reality, and this goes back to that point about top down versus bottom up. If you've just raised money, how much money you have, and the runway you want to get to. I think that you have to be realistic and look at, okay, what is it going to cost to develop, launch, and do this? And then if you've been around a little bit longer and what your customer acquisition cost is, what your conversion rate is on ads or whatever. I mean, I think you have to, maybe there are some numbers that I can't recall from the top of my head that would be good guidelines of what the spend in, what the percent spend should be in each area. But every business is in such a different place of where they are in their free cash flow and where they are in their fundraising and number of customers they have and all that. So I think it's really important to just say, it goes back to understand the cost of what it's going to take you to deliver your product or service, and then say, okay, well, we know we need that, and then figure out, as it scales, what happens to that cost. And then you can build the support infrastructure and budget around that. But if I think understanding the basic cost and then what it costs for you to acquire customers and what they're worth and what your churn is going to be and all that. So I wish it were that easy that you could just, say, okay, I have this much money, I want it to last 3 years. Let me just go down and plug it in percentages across each group. But it's going to vary so much. And I know this question was particularly about SaaS, but it's even in the SaaS world, depending on what your IP is, how much you're dependent on other providers to do it. It's hard to say that number, but maybe, Roy and Sid will have more specific numbers. That's my general, what I wanted to throw out on it.
No, I'll double click on your point. I mean, it's impossible to answer that because each company has its own go-to market, like sales led and product led. They don't look alike in terms of sales and marketing and that type of stuff. When you sell to CFOs or when you sell to consumers, that budget will look different. So my annoying response would be like, benchmark in your category ask founders, ask CFOs, ask your VCs. Read, see what are good and bad benchmark, and aspire to be on the good side of things.
Yeah, definitely. Sid?
I don't know. I think I both of them have covered the topic pretty well in terms of like what needs to get done. I think like I mean at different stages, I guess it changes, and like it in particular to your business. But general rule of thumb in SaaS is like, yes, sales and marketing will eat up most of your budget. So if you're probably spending the most over there, you're like it's what generally happens in a SaaS business.
Yeah. We'll let any additional questions kind of trickle in, but yeah, I think it's strategies to boost your cash flow and bottom line. I think we brought together kind of an interesting piece in terms of Glenn with his in-house CFO experience, and then Sid over at Spendflo in terms of optimizing kind of your SaaS costs, maximize your ROI on your SaaS investments, and Roy over at Received, who's kind of the other side of the house, eliminating kind of IT spend through flexibility, as well as optimizing your revenue either through usage or subscriptions. So that's kind of it from our panel. Any final thoughts? Otherwise, I think Roy?
All right.
Oh, thanks everyone. Thanks Glenn and Alex for being part of this. Thanks Sid for the partnership. Thanks everyone that joined.
Thank you guys for taking the time.
Thanks to our panelists. Thanks to everyone who joined. Thanks to Spendflo and Received. Pleasure.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. See you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.